The Supreme Court has just delivered what might be the most devastating legal blow to a sitting Prime Minister in modern British history, and it happened while tens of thousands of people were flooding the streets of Belfast in a protest so enormous it's being compared to the Troubles-era demonstrations that once brought Northern Ireland to a standstill. Keir Starmer's government attempted to push through a policy change that would fundamentally alter the constitutional relationship between Westminster and Northern Ireland, and the highest court in the land basically said, absolutely not, sunshine, while simultaneously, almost poetically, the people of Northern Ireland were making it abundantly clear what they thought of Westminster's latest attempt to meddle in their affairs. This is constitutional crisis territory. This is the kind of moment where the delicate peace that's held Northern Ireland together for decades starts looking decidedly fragile. And this is absolutely the kind of explosive political drama that reminds you why British politics never gets boring for long. If you're not already subscribed to British Mirror, you need to hit that subscribe button immediately and smash that notification bell, because we're about to unpack a constitutional showdown that has massive implications for the future of the United Kingdom itself. And trust me, you'll want to be here for every twist in this developing saga. Let's set the scene properly, because Northern Ireland is always complicated, always sensitive, and always one wrong move away from serious trouble. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 essentially ended the Troubles, that horrific period of sectarian violence that claimed thousands of lives and left deep scars on Northern Irish society. The agreement was a masterpiece of diplomatic compromise, creating a power-sharing government between Unionists and Nationalists, establishing cross-border cooperation with the Republic of Ireland, and basically giving both communities enough of what they wanted that peace became preferable to continued violence. It's held for over 25 years now, which is genuinely remarkable, but it's also fragile. You don't just erase centuries of conflict and decades of bloodshed with a single agreement, no matter how well crafted. Into this delicate situation comes Keir Starmer with what his government described as a necessary update to post-Brexit trading arrangements affecting Northern Ireland. Now, anyone who's been paying even minimal attention to British politics knows that Northern Ireland and Brexit have been a nightmare combination from day one. The protocol, then the Windsor Framework, endless negotiations with the EU, the Democratic Unionist Party collapsing the Assembly repeatedly. It's been an absolute shambles. Starmer's government claimed they'd found a solution that would satisfy everyone, improve trade flows, and strengthen the union. Spoiler alert, they had not found such a solution. The policy Starmer was attempting to implement would have given Westminster significantly more direct control over certain aspects of Northern Ireland governance, particularly around trade regulations and customs arrangements. On paper, this might sound reasonable. Westminster is the UK Parliament. Northern Ireland is part of the UK. Surely Westminster should have authority over UK policy. Except that's not how Northern Ireland works. That's not how the Good Friday Agreement works. And attempting to impose Westminster control unilaterally over matters that are supposed to be handled through the carefully balanced power-sharing structures is basically taking a sledgehammer to the constitutional settlement that's maintained peace for a quarter century. The Supreme Court case challenging Starmer's policy was brought by a coalition of Northern Irish political parties, civil society groups, and individuals who argued that the government's actions violated both the Good Friday Agreement and fundamental constitutional principles about devolution and consent. The legal arguments were complex, involving European Convention rights, international treaty obligations, devolution statutes, and the constitutional status of peace agreements. But the core issue was simple. Can Westminster unilaterally change arrangements in Northern Ireland that were established through international agreement and local consent? The Supreme Court's answer was a resounding no. The judgment itself is absolutely scathing. Supreme Court justices are usually quite measured in their language, preferring careful legal reasoning to emotional condemnation. But reading between the lines of this judgment, you can practically feel the judge's incredulity that the government thought this was acceptable. They emphasize repeatedly that the Good Friday Agreement isn't just another piece of legislation that can be amended or repealed at Westminster's convenience. It's an international treaty, registered with the United Nations, that fundamentally changed the constitutional arrangements governing Northern Ireland. You don't just ignore those obligations because they're politically inconvenient. The timing of the Supreme Court ruling is particularly dramatic because it came down on the exact same day that this massive protest was taking place in Belfast. Tens of thousands of people from both nationalist and unionist communities, which almost never happens, united in opposition to Westminster interference. When you can get traditionally opposed communities in Northern Ireland to march together against a common enemy, you know you've massively miscalculated. The symbolism of the court ruling dropping while the streets were filled with protesters is almost too perfect. It's like the universe itself was saying, "Read the room, Keir." The protest itself was extraordinary to witness. Belfast city centre was absolutely packed. Estimates put the crowd at somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 people, which for a city of Belfast's size is genuinely massive. You had DUP supporters marching alongside Sinn Féin supporters. You had unionists who want Northern Ireland to remain part of the UK walking side by side with nationalists who want Irish reunification. The banners and chants reflected this unusual coalition. Hands off our agreement, Belfast out of Westminster, respect the peace. This wasn't about constitutional status or sectarian identity. It was about Northern Ireland, all of Northern Ireland, telling Westminster to back off. The political miscalculation by Starmer's government here is genuinely staggering. Did nobody in number 10 think to maybe consult with Northern Irish parties before attempting to unilaterally change constitutional arrangements? Did nobody consider that perhaps imposing Westminster control might be politically explosive? Did nobody remember that Northern Ireland has a rather fraught history with British government overreach, and that maybe, just maybe, a delicate touch was required? Apparently not. Instead, they charged ahead with all the diplomatic finesse of a bull in a china shop, and now they're dealing with a Supreme Court defeat and mass protests. Brilliant strategizing, that. The response from Northern Irish politicians has been uniformly scathing, which again, when you get everyone from the DUP to Sinn Féin agreeing on something, that's remarkable. The DUP, traditionally the most pro-union party, issued a statement saying Westminster's actions were a betrayal of unionist principles and an attack on Northern Irish democracy. Sinn Féin, which wants Irish reunification, said the government's behaviour was typical British arrogance and disregard for Irish rights. The Alliance Party, which positions itself as cross-community, called it constitutional vandalism. The SDLP termed it Westminster imperialism. When literally every party in Northern Ireland is condemning you, you've achieved something special in the worst possible way. What's making this even more politically toxic for Starmer is the optics of a Labour government supposedly committed to devolution and respecting national identities within the UK, behaving in ways that seem lifted directly from the worst excesses of British colonial administration. Labour's supposed to be the party that gets devolution, that respects Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as partners rather than subordinates. Yet here they are trying to impose Westminster control in direct contradiction of international treaty obligations and local democratic wishes. The cognitive dissonance is genuinely impressive. The Supreme Court judgment doesn't just block this specific policy, it establishes important precedents about the limits of Westminster power in relation to devolved administrations and international agreements. The judges make clear that the Good Friday Agreement has a special constitutional status that constrains what Westminster can lawfully do.
This isn't just about Northern Ireland. This has implications for Scotland and Wales too, for any future government that might be tempted to ride roughshod over devolution settlements. The Supreme Court has basically said that constitutional arrangements established with democratic consent cannot be unilaterally unpicked by Westminster whenever it's convenient. The international dimension is also significant. The Good Friday Agreement involves the UK and Irish governments as co-guarantors, with the US administration playing a key supporting role. When Starmer's government tried to unilaterally change arrangements, the Irish government immediately objected, pointing out that you can't just modify an international treaty without the consent of all parties. The Biden administration issued a carefully worded but clearly concerned statement about the importance of preserving the Good Friday Agreement. When you're getting diplomatic pushback from both Dublin and Washington, you know you've created a proper mess.